Dwarves, orcs, humans, lend me your ears. I'm going to talk to you about all 3 specs on Warlocks and Battle for Azeroth. This is a game of Warsong Gulch. I'm going to try to do more daily battleground videos like this and talk to you about the game as well. Some of my commentary videos or uncommentary videos will be on my Let's Play channel, as sometimes I play quite a bit. This is where I'm playing Demonology because I love playing Demonology. I love what they've done with the spec, and I'm going to talk to you guys about it. I have a really good idea about Warlocks and where they sit now, especially after Uldir has been released. We can really look at a lot of the classes the way they sit. Now, granted, there might do a balance pass maybe in a week or so, but I don't want to put too much faith in Blizzard, so I'm just going to tell you how it is right now and kind of where we've come from. Okay, Tark, let me tell you about all 3 classes right now. I've played all 3 classes in Battlegrounds and in PvE, doing some mythics. I did Destruction, first time is Destruction in a mythic +5, so it can be done. And every spec is viable. What is the most optimal spec, and where do Warlocks and the specs of Warlocks compare with other classes? Well, that's something I'm going to get to in this video. Let's talk about Affliction first though here. And it's a new and interesting spot. It's definitely the best of all 3 Warlock specs, kind of like how it was in Legion. Sadly, that's the case, and there's reasons behind that, which I'm going to get to when I talk about the other specs. Affliction does very good single target damage. Deathbolt is a little bit overpowered maybe. I've heard of people getting 40k Deathbolts even in Battlegrounds, where this other Warlock I saw, he got over about 2.3 million damage in a Battleground. And I don't see that too often for Warlocks, so he was doing pretty good on that. And then what they've done is they've taken Affliction and moved it from massive cleave, AoE cleave damage, where they would do ridiculous damage in, say, Nighthold. That's where I remember it the best. And they've taken that from them doing that to really good single target DPS. Most of their damage I notice comes from unstable Affliction, and that's okay because it's a shard spender, and that's kind of how I feel like Warlock should be. Like, you spend soul shards on things, like a limited resource which you can only have 5 of. You should do ridiculous damage doing that, considering you're primarily a damage class. Having this great single target DPS really helps out Affliction in doing the raids and Mythic Plus encounters, especially on boss fights, as really the other 2 classes cannot keep up with them. Inevitable Demise is a really interesting Azerite trait, and I only have it for 1 piece of my gear that I was able to build it up on, and I have a lot of other gear that I can use. The problem is that I really kind of need to stack it with all 3 to really see how good it is, because I do have like Thunderous Blast and other really good Azerite traits. And if you start going down to the guy near the Transmogger and start redoing all the gold, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money to try to do all that. You have this rogue trying to stick on me as Demonology. And I'm getting decent heals, and this is just an interesting battleground. So the problem is too with Warlocks and PvP is that you get shadow locked, and that's where Affliction is always, I think, done well, and that's why I think I originally shifted to Warlock. I did play a Warrior for the longest time, and then back in Wrath of the Lich King, I started to play a Affliction Warlock, and I did way more damage, and I just noticed how powerful Affliction Warlocks were. And I never really played the other classes, but I played Affliction Warlock so long now, I want to play other classes and other specs, and that's why I'm talking about this in my video right now. We're going to get real angry in a minute. So back to Inevitable Demise. It was a little bugged. It was working for Drain Soul, which is the level 15 talent. They apparently patched that out. That's okay, whatever. But apparently Inevitable Demise is a really powerful talent, and it doesn't seem like they're going to nerf it, but it's something to keep your eye on as a Warlock. Does it need to be nerfed? Maybe. It does huge. If you allow a lot of those corruption ticks to go off, even in PvP, those can be dispelled. And in PvE, it's pretty convenient to go into a boss fight, and if you're coordinated with this Hank, you can go in with like 100 stacks, and you can do a lot of damage, especially if you have 3 of those traits. I was trying to bait out the rogue there because he got sapped, so I tried to use a Shadow Fury. So Okay, let's talk about Destruction. Destruction is a very interesting spec, very fun spec to play, and the Chaos bolts do really good damage, and they're also really cool animation. I like it. It's interesting. The Azerite trait, Crashing Chaos, works really well with your Infernal on a 3-minute cooldown. I can do really big Chaos Bolt damage if I use the right Azerite traits, and I have 2 pieces of the Crashing Chaos. This is when you summon your Infernal, you do the next 8 Chaos Bolts you do, which is basically the whole duration of your Infernal, do a ridiculous amount of bonus damage. And you can stack those traits, and it by leaps and bounds is like basically your best trait. But again, it's on a 3-minute cooldown, and it only lasts for I think 20 or 30 seconds. So yes, in Battlegrounds it does well if you can drop your Infernal, but the problem is the cooldown of it is really long, and the sustainability of it. But you can hit, now I'm not taking anything away from it, because you can hit huge Chaos Bolt damage. I can hit in World PvP, especially going single damage Chaos Bolt with the PvP spec. You can get up to 50k bolts like consistently. It's an auto crit all the time. My gear isn't really spec'd to be full-blown crit, but I could see a Destruction Warlock doing insane damage on that as well. Destruction in and of itself, I think, is a very simple spec. It's pretty cool. There's a lot more control with it. Like you can root people using Conflagrate. I'm talking about the combination of World PvP and using the PvP talents. So you have that going for you. Rain of Fire is useless. It needs either a major buff or a complete change altogether. I don't even have it on my bar, to be honest with you. So I guess it could be good in very situational instances, but I just find that it's like a lot of other Warlock players thinks that it does need a big rework, and I agree. That's Rain of Fire. Firestorm is a really cool last tier talent with Demonology. It has a cool animation. It does a really good amount of damage too, and I love just how it like randomly hits everybody, and it combos really well with Cataclysm. Again, it's situational. I can see in PvP how like Eye of Storm and those kind of, the Battle for Gilneas, like Warsong Gulch is probably one of the weakest BGs for Warlocks, because you can see here it's like you're constantly trying to move around and get at people, and the limited mobility of Warlocks has always been a major problem. And Destruction, having to channel all these spells, makes it even much harder to get around. And so Destruction is okay, but let's talk about Destruction at PvE aspect. I have done a Mythic +5 basically the first day it came out. As Destruction, I was very new to Destruction, played a little bit. The reality is that I think Destruction's okay, but it's definitely not going to do the competitive damage that you're going to need to do high level rating or Mythic plus dungeons. Will you be able to get by with Destruction? Definitely, especially if you can do the mechanics correctly and not die. For sure, you can do okay. Again, you can do okay as Destruction. Is Destruction below average? Yes. Is it have very good single target damage compared to other classes? No. Is it damage need to be buffed? Yes. And one reason, we're going to get into some of the reasons of this in a little bit, but let's talk about Demonology right now. Demonology, I've been playing this spec the most. I think it's the funnest out of all 3 specs. And basically the major benefit of Demonology, it does have a lot of cool aspects. I delved into the damage that I was doing a little bit more lately. My gear score with Demonology is up to 343, which is actually really good. I did get a piece of Uldir gear in offhand, so in my main hand is 340, so that's pretty good gear. So I can, the gear question isn't really a question with Demonology here. Demonology strength is that it can do really good stacked cleave damage. In other words, if like all the mobs or even players are stacked up on one another, you have to get out your imps, so you have to channel out a lot of imps and then you implode them. The problem is the imp damage is okay. I'm interested to kind of figure out if you can build an imp spec up to try to synergize or catalyze this spec a little bit more, but I just feel like it's not really, that's not where the spec is going. Now in Demonology, I did know, like, what's the biggest damage abilities that you're doing? Well, your pet, your Fell Lord, does a ton of damage. Especially his Fellstorm does a lot of damage, depending on what spec you are doing. The thing is, though, is you kind of more go into a Demon Bolt spec, your Demon Bolt is going to shoot up the number 1. So as when I think of Demonology Warlocks, I really don't want my Demon Bolt, and this is because I'm casting instant Demon Bolts all the time. I don't really like that. You know, I want my major reason of why I want to pick Demonology is I want to just summon a crap ton of animals, overwhelm my opponent with demons, and then see what happens. I'm going to talk about the specs in another video because I kind of want to just talk about, since Uldir just came out, a little bit more. So stay tuned for another video in the near future on how I've refined the Demonology spec, because I'm still working out really all the kinks. And I really think, I'll just give you a hint, I think that Doom is a little overrated. I think Sacrifice Souls and Inner Demons is just really where you want to be. And on the last tier talent, I think that Nether Portal is awesome. But the problem is it's just really kind of buggy. Yes, they've fixed all the animals' levels, but the damage that comes out of Nether Portal is, from what I can tell in the damage meter when I break it down after doing island expeditions, it's terrible. I don't know what it is, but you do lose quite a bit of damage, like probably 500 DPS over Sacrifice Souls, and that's a real shame. And part of this comes down to the whole idea of spending soul shards. When you spend soul shards for a talent, or you swap it over a different talent, example Soul Strike versus Summon Battlefiend, spending a soul shard versus gaining a soul shard, there should be a major difference. There should be a cost benefit analysis, so you give the Warlock an ability to determine how he wants to manage his soul shards and how he wants to play his particular style of game. And yes, Demonology pets are still really buggy. They don't attack all the time. It is a little bit better than I can tell. I don't know if they've done anything to that at all when they've started to like fix some of the levels. Again, a lot of this might be subject to change, and some of these complaints might be obsolete in a few weeks because they might just patch the game. But if after they go over the first balance patch and you don't see any changes to Demonology or Destro, there's literally probably no hope for you. So you should get that in your skull right now as a Warlock, that unless a totally new dungeon, some months will have to go by before Destro and Demo will become good. And in general, I think players are not going to be that patient. So I'm starting to rant, and this is good because I'm pissed. So let's talk about some of the PvE issues. Warlocks are having a major problem, I think, ramping up damage in mythics, and that's a part of the Warlock class, I think, as a whole. But that's not the major issue, like with trash mobs, that they're dying just really quickly. So Warlocks can't really initiate like their cycle, or whatever you want to call it, the rotation, to really kill the mobs quickly. Back in the day, like as an Affliction Warlock, I used to run up to a pack of mobs and I could just AoE seed them, and then I would just do ridiculous damage. As long as the tank could just keep pulling, the damage would be like astronomical. But in Battle for Azeroth, it's just a lot different. You can't really do that type of specialized cleave damage that you were probably able to do as an Affliction only. So you have the trash mobs that are dying really quickly, and Affliction can do really good single target damage, which is where their niche is right now in the Warlock class itself. But yes, there's other classes that can be better, and I'm trying to show you some charts here of the latest Uldir raid and why I'm pissed. And you can see this correlates pretty well to Battlegrounds too, and why you think like, oh, I'm getting sniped by hunters, like why is this happening to me? Well, now you know why. Survival hunters and Beastmaster hunters are right up on top on damage. But not only that, but they have some cheesy heals. Like I was reading up about Beastmaster hunters, they have some spirit heal. Like not only can they heal themselves, but they can heal other players too with this. And it is really cheese doodle. And if you think about just the Warlock's Healthstone, the preparation of the Healthstone, like you have to prepare it to use it, and it doesn't even full heal you. Back in Legion, you had a Healthstone, the artifact actually gave you a full heal. So that was another reason to play Affliction. Well, little did you know you could wear mail armor, have a pet heal you, not only yourself, but your friend as well. So the devs over at Blizzard are like a bunch of drunk dwarves that are just so thick-headed. They just over-nerfed when they came into Battle for Azeroth. They nerfed Destruction like 4 or 5 times. They also nerfed Demonology. They gave them a minus 30% aura. And then they also gave them a Implosion, a minus 30% aura. These are some boneheaded moves, and you can see it in the chart that it's almost tit for tat. Like they probably didn't need to nerf it, and they're just really going to fall behind. These two specs are really going to fall behind. So even in like a future raid where it might be required, the class itself is going to be underrepresented. So I'm really pissed. And the only thing you can hope for as a Warlock in a change to like Destruction or Demonology is that their first balance patch that Blizzard will do, they will somehow change Demonology and buff it in some way to start bringing it up as a true damage class. Warlocks have always had low survivability. That survivability, low survivability, needs to trade off with the damage that they do. People just don't want to play Affliction. You know, they've already done that path. They want to play something new. Why spend all the time on Demonology if we're not going to let players play it? That's my end of my rant. Like, subscribe, comment. I'll see you guys on the next battlefield.